horrible foreign policy, soldiers as pawns, and imperial British overstretch. We're not talking about the American Revolution. This is Bodyguard. Bodyguard is a 2018 British Netflix thriller. It was created and written by Jed Mercurio. It stars Richard Madden, who you know as Robb Stark from Game of Thrones, that DJ guy from Ibiza, and the voice of Alucard in Castlevania Lord of Shadows 1 and 2. In this series, he plays Sergeant David Budd, who is an Afghanistan war veteran. But more importantly, he is a Protection Command bodyguard. Keely Hawes plays the Right Honorable Home Secretary Julia Montague. So the story revolves around Sergeant David Budd, an Afghan war veteran who is returned and is now a bodyguard for government officials. He's tasked with protecting Julia Montague, who is the Home Secretary. They both have strong issues with one another, but can they cooperate in order to keep Julia alive? So as you guys know, when I talk about shows, I talk about the good, the bad, and then I give you my score. That being said, let's talk about the good. Richard Madden as Sergeant David Budd gives one of the most nuanced, layered performances I've ever seen of a post-war veteran. Sergeant David Budd is admirable, he's sad, he's clever, he's empathetic, he's hard as nails, he's so many things wrapped up into this one person. I also feel like this is one of the most realistic shows when it comes to portrayal of how veterans who've returned from conflict feel about their government, or even of the people they dealt with while they were overseas. It shows what we as veterans actually feel, and it does it in a very gritty, realistic light. There were a lot of times during the show where David or one of his ex-military friends said something and I said to myself out loud, you got that right. The opening of the show, the first episode, is one of the best pilot episodes I have ever seen. The first 10 minutes especially, like, get you on board and you want to see for the rest of the series what happens to this guy, because he is charismatic, he is smart, and the whole first episode in general really rewards attentive viewers because you pick up a lot of things on David Budd and his personality, and Julia Montague and the people she works with, all these little details that really pay off as the show goes on and these characters are built up more and more. And that's the thing, these characters get a lot of building, the story gets stronger and stronger up to a point. With these different characters, you get a lot of emotional range, you get a lot of conflicts, whether it be inner conflicts or conflicts with one another. For a lot of these episodes, you really get to see these people as individuals and how they work with one another, the different dynamics, their sense of duty, and how one person thinks this is the right way and how the other person thinks this is the right way, and how they butt heads or how they come together, and how even enemies can kind of agree in some things. It's pretty interesting, and I think it's really integral to the show overall. And speaking of how people work together, I think the chemistry between David and Julia is pretty interesting, because at first you have this awkwardness and this dislike, and then you have a relationship that slowly builds. They get more trust in one another, and no matter what happens or how David feels about anything, he always has this strong sense of duty to protect her, and she has this strong sense of duty to protect the country. But throughout the entire series, when they are on screen together and they are doing things as a team, they really kill it. So it really subverts your expectations and what you thought one thing would be or what the answer to this was. A lot of the times, something you thought was the case is completely different. And they reveal it little by little. Most of the time, you find out things only as David finds them out. Again, that's very important. I don't like to know a lot of the things that the character doesn't know. I really like when you find things out with the character. You empathize with them more. You feel like you're, on this journey with them and you're finding out these details, and you're going to win with them or you're going to lose with them one way or the other. Now, like I said earlier, a lot of the things the soldiers say or feel or the things that they show are spot on. And I think that's because their creator of the show, Jed Mercurio, was a doctor. So he dealt with injury and death and all that kind of stuff. On top of that, he was in the Royal Air Force. So he was a military man too. So if anybody can write in an authentic way about service and death and loss and all that kind of stuff, it's this guy. He really puts on display the physical and mental toll that war takes on a person who has served overseas. He also shows that a lot more people, especially soldiers who served overseas, are starting to understand that age-old adage, don't start none, won't be none. If we don't go to some place and mess with people, their culture, their country, their natural resources, they're not going to care about us. They're going to stay to themselves just like we stay to ourselves. Sometimes when we should intervene, like in Darfur or whatever, we don't. And in times that we shouldn't, we butt our noses in. It's really dumb. And they really delve into that on this show with the soldiers, with David, with things that Julia or the people around her say. They go into all the different facets and how it affects the decisions that these politicians or even people like David make. And again, remember, I served in the military for 10 years. I did deploy overseas many times. I definitely identify with a lot of things they said. I definitely identify with a lot of things that they felt. But going back to the show, there is this part of David that doesn't agree with a lot of the things that Julia says or does. But because he is this strong soldier with a good moral compass, you know, and now he's this great police officer with these skills that he got from Afghanistan and his training in the police force. He says to himself, look, I know she feels this way, but my job is to protect this woman no matter what, and that's what I'm going to do. And really, that speaks to the mindset of all civil servants and military members. They have this strong sense of duty, this strong moral compass, and they're just trying to do what's right. Like I said earlier, this show is kind of a slow burn. I think it builds tension and it builds the characters, and you get a lot more plot building and lore and world building and stuff than you would in a normal series because of that slow burn, so I think it works. But there is some action, and when the action happens in the show, it is just kick ass. It might be short, but it's going to be well choreographed and it's going to be punchy. So you have these long, quiet moments, and then you have these really kick-ass, action-packed moments that really take your breath away, that really surprise you, sometimes shock you. There's one moment where I was just like, holy crap, they actually just did that. A lot of people say that this show kind of slumps towards the middle, or especially towards the end. I don't think that's the case. I don't think it slumped. I think it just took a different direction, something that people weren't expecting and that some people didn't want. A lot of the people didn't like where that narrative went. The cinematography, the editing, the direction, the sound, everything about this production, the technical aspects of it are top notch. They are up there with any, Hollywood blockbuster or whatever. It looks fantastic. And of course it sounds fantastic too. When you have cars screeching, gunshots, explosions or whatever, they sound great. And because the show starts as one thing and ends as another, there are always these new threads popping up, and they weave this really entertaining story that keeps you hooked. And that's another thing about this show. This one is great for binging because it's only 6 hours long. So if you feel like sitting down and watching something, or having something playing in the background while you're doing housework or whatever, then you can do this one. It's not a 10 or a 13 or a 20 hour show like a lot of the others are. But with all that good out of the way, let's talk about the bad. While some people do enjoy a good slow burn like myself, a lot of others will not. I sat down to watch this first episode with my buddy Hamid, and he hated it. He didn't watch past the first episode, and he just couldn't get into it. Now, granted, he didn't see it from the beginning. He didn't see that first 10 minutes that really got you hooked. He saw after that when it was kind of slow. So his opinion was different. If he had seen it from the beginning, I think he probably would have enjoyed it a bit more and probably at least watched a few more episodes and maybe finished it. But then again, maybe that wouldn't be the case, because as this show progresses, like I said, it goes from one thing to another, and all these cool threads that pop up, some of them aren't so strong, and the whole thing kind of unravels before your eyes. And unfortunately, they lead to a kind of unfulfilling ending. It's not what you wanted. You wanted the show to be one thing, and it ends up being something very different. Now, some people thought that was great. For me, the show changed after episode 4. Episode 4 was super strong, very interesting. Some great action, some stuff that I didn't see coming, some pretty genuine surprises. I liked that a lot. And then after that, for episodes 5 and 6, again, it became a completely different genre. And there were some pretty fantastical things that happened where you're just like, really? That's how they would do that? So they were kind of just done for plot. They were kind of just done for the show. And a lot of them really kill your suspension of disbelief that you've had that entire time up to that point. Because up until that point, up until episode 5, like, you were on board. Episodes 5 and 6 weren't bad, but they weren't great. They were kind of like, on par with everything else you see on TV, especially when it comes to like crime shows and stuff. And when you have this amazing set of shows that the UK has, these amazing crime and cop dramas, and then this one kind of turns into that for episode 5 and 6, it's weaker than a lot of the ones that you will see elsewhere on Netflix or Amazon or TV in general. They felt like they really thought about episodes 1 through 4, and this is what we want it to be, and this is how it'll come out, and this is what we'll do, and people will really get into it. And then we'll end it with this big surprise. And then after that happened in 4, they were like, well, shit, what do we do with 5 and 6? We better come up with something. When it comes to on-screen chemistry, depending on if it's the main characters or side characters or whatever, when there's a love scene, that's pretty important. A love scene can show how connected two people really are. And the love scenes in this show are really weird. They're just bad. The angles and the editing, they're kind of awkward. And I don't want to say gross, but I was sitting there and I was watching it and I was just like, I'm really not feeling this. This is kind of out of the blue and it feels a little creepy and weird. I know that's not the vibe they were going for, obviously, but I wasn't the only one who felt this way. I talked to other people and we were just like, okay, what is going on? Wait, why are they doing that? If you're sitting there thinking that, then that means that scene wasn't executed well. And really not just executed poorly, like some of the worst love scenes maybe I've ever seen in a TV show. A lot of the solutions and the twists, the red herrings and stuff that the show had, they were kind of predictable. They were supposed to surprise you, but a lot of times I was just like, this is going to happen or this is going to happen. If you watch a lot of crime shows, you saw that coming. It was kind of duh. Don't get me wrong, there were some genuine surprises as well, but for the most part, this was, predictable shit. And it wasn't just the predictability of a lot of the show, it was a lot of the logic. It was one of those where, like, if you stop to think about it, you're just like, come on, man, how did that happen? I can't say what they were because it would give parts of the show away. If you just stop for like 1 second and think about a couple things, you have like 10 questions. Really kind of treat the viewer like an idiot. It doesn't expect a lot of you. It doesn't expect you to infer anything. It kind of just says everything. There's some exposition dumps. It's just, man. I really wish they would have gone a little bit more in depth with the stuff on the veterans and the politicians, why they do what they do, what they've been through, why they think this is right, why they think this is wrong. The final little thing that happens is very cheesy, sentimental stuff. I mean, it works on a certain level if you're like the yay, happy ending type of person, but it's not very realistic. If you're just looking at it like, I don't know about that one. That being said, what is my score? Drum roll, please. 6 out of 10.